Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of PitchUs. Super excited to have Eli Herrick with us with StatStak. My name is Tim Cooley. I am the author of the Pitch Deck book. The book is really about the fundamentals of a deck, which is what we're here to do, is talk to Eli about his presentation. So Eli, please go ahead and share your screen and then pitch us.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you having me, Tim. Let me get into it here. Can you see my screen all right from there?
Yep.
Perfect. So my name's Eli Herrick, co-founder, CEO of StatStak. StatStak got started at the beginning of the pandemic. I was a senior playing baseball at Duke. Turns out it's pretty hard to do that when you can't go outside anymore. So it came down to much more of the behind the scenes. How are we going to get all of our information, and how are we going to get that to professional sports teams looking for athletes? And it turns out that wasn't really possible. So all the data that we were collecting as athletes was spread out over all these different drop boxes and places. And it was just a huge mess of how do we organize this thing now that there's no more playing outside. From there, we started talking with all of our coaches, with all of the people really involved in that process. And it turned out pretty quickly that there was no playbook, no one was collecting this, and there was no organization of that. The deeper we got into that, we realized that this wasn't only a problem of how people were taking care of their stats, but how people were taking care of their entire organization and how they were really running their business. This is an actual conversation between one of our current angel investors and his son's pitching coach. As you can see, there's 9 texts back and forth. There's a phone call and there's a Venmo transaction. The other important thing about this is that the Venmo transaction is actually for multiple lessons, and it's just rounded up into, hey, here's what covers the rest of my lessons. Let me know when you need more. So nothing's on paper, nothing's being tracked. Everything's by hand, and it takes 72 hours to actually complete this transaction. So massively inefficient for people that are trying to run their business and actually get to doing what they love, which is training athletes and working in sports. So what we found, the more athletes and the more organizations that we talked to and the more coaches that were trying to solve this problem, is that the guys that are solving it and the guys that are trying to solve it have to use 8 or 9 different platforms to solve it. And that's because nothing's built for the sports industry and how they can actually run their businesses with that. So you've got guys using a messaging service. You'll get like a constant contact or maybe a GroupMe. You have these facility management solutions, but the facility management solutions were built 20 years ago. You've got Easy Facility, eSoft, and some other ones. And then you have multiple team management. People will even use different team management solutions within the same organization. So if there's an 18U and say a 16U organization, they're actually going to be using different team management solutions. Sometimes it's complete chaos. And what that really ends up in is you've got payments that are not being collected. You've got a lot of different scheduling apps that are actually causing conflicts because they're not talking with each other. And you've got all this siloed data. So what we did was we basically took the little 10% of each one of those solutions that they were using and we baked it into one central app. So it works on mobile, which is the most important part, because about 93% of our users are using it on mobile. Right now, they're using different technologies that aren't actually mobile friendly. So a lot of these don't have mobile outlets that you can actually work with, but ours is mobile first. It works on desktops, on laptops, really anywhere that you have a browser. All you have to do for a facility or for a team is you just go in and set up your assets. So who are your coaches? What are you offering? And then everything from there is automated. So parents don't have to call or text coaches anymore. They can just go on the website, find exactly what they're looking for, check out. All that cash goes directly into the coaches or organization's bank account directly. We do all of the organization behind the scenes. So if someone needs to have a reminder, have a cancellation, do a refund process, anything like that, that's actually just being automated in the background. So coaches are just really getting texts and having their calendar fill up of where they need to be and when. So we've had a ton of success with this already. We're saving organizations about 3.5 hours a day, which is huge. Generally that lands on the coach that's actually trying to run lessons at that same time. So coaches that are very time conscious of how many lessons can I do a day are spending a lot of that time just on their phone, going back and forth with athletes and trying to use all these different software solutions. So we're actually adding a significant amount of time back into their day and just removing a lot of headaches. It turns out a lot of coaches don't like dealing with naggy parents. They're going to keep hitting them up about, when am I going to find some time for my kid when you have time, and the coach is trying to coach and is trying to manage the schedule at the same time. But the other part about really engaged users is that we actually have this nice upsell mechanism. So a lot of our background was in data management, hence StatStak. So we're actually upselling technology that we've developed with data management, video management, and then just showing all that data and video to next level organizations like colleges, professional teams, and things like that. So we're upselling that at checkout and giving those organizations a kickback. And then since we launched this iteration of the product in January, we've got about 520,000 of annual recurring contract value, basically organizations that get on board and we start processing revenue with. The way that we've have been able to grow very, very quickly is with word of mouth. So you get in with one organization, and then all of a sudden all their athletes come on board. As soon as we start working with that organization, with those athletes, they're constantly trying to promote themselves, right? So then we get more marketing, more exposure just from athletes using the website, and then more coaches coming on the website, which then leads to more organizations there. So it's a really nice flywheel. It's in a niche enough space that we can actually grow pretty quickly, just within word of mouth and following up there with obviously outbound sales. The market in general is actually much bigger than most people think. Youth sports in general is a $19 billion market. That's actually expected to go up to $70 billion in the next 5 years. And that's really driven by this niche that we're talking about here, which is that advanced youth sports space. Parents that are spending tens of thousands of dollars on their son or daughter's athletic career, giving them all these opportunities and having to go through things like coaches and teams and training organizations to do that. So just starting with training organizations here, you get $700 million of fee processing. I'm going to get into that in a second here of where all of our cash is actually coming from. But that starts at 700 million. You work up into getting teams as well. So these organizations that we're talking about will run a dozen teams that have different training facilities and sometimes hundreds of coaches in one organization. If you can process all those different transactions, and I've got a web later in the deck, but you get up to 10.5 billion, and then that whole market here, which is just your total addressable, is 37 billion. That's obviously if we get much deeper into horizontal integration and things like that. But we run the entire business on a payment processing model. So for every transaction, we get 1% and then a $2.49 service fee. The average facility that we work with processes about $500,000 a year. So for us, one facility is worth anywhere from $10,000 if they're doing a lot of memberships and things like that, up to $20,000, $25,000. And then with the ability to add on those direct sales, we're trying to double that account value basically. So adding about 6 training facilities per month gets us where we need to be. This is based on 3. If we can do 6 with our current numbers or 3 with the adjusted numbers for more B2B upsell and direct sales, that gets us to a really nice market pretty quickly. The thing to focus on this side specifically is our advisory board. We have a lot of our current angel investors are in fintech, which gives us a huge opportunity to do things that other organizations just can't, because we have intros to these newer banks and these newer systems that are actually letting us do much more complex things like payment splitting and different things that are much more complex than just, hey, a transaction has to go in and come out. We can do it so that a transaction comes in, can go to all of your different parties. So then the coach, the organization, the regional organization all get their cut of that payment. And that's really been made possible through our advisory board and a lot of introductions that we've been able to make there. But it also opens the door in the future if we want to go into financing, because sometimes these team fees are thousands of dollars to play for us, an organization over the summer to play for an organization that has travel fees and a lot of different things built in for a long period of time. So we're really well prepared to do that. We're uniquely positioned within the market just on how specific but functional our app can be. Early on, when we were figuring out exactly what the pain point was and where we had some product market fit, a lot of people ask for custom solutions. So different organizations think about their business a little bit differently. I think that's also a symptom of being of being forced to use 7, 8, 9 different solutions, is that they've kind of got pocketed into what other people offer, not what business they want to run. So they'll come to us and this is what I want to do. This is how I want to put it together. So what we've done is we've actually built a white label application that's got about 100 toggles on the back end. So then we can come in and just toggle off and on exactly what they want their solution to look like. It takes us about 2 hours to set up a new account. But then once the account is set up, it's completely customized for them. It's on whatever domain they want, and it's hooked up to all the different APIs. And it just runs itself from there. So that's a pretty high level of what we're doing. We've raised $1.2 million so far. We just raised a little bit more a few weeks ago, but we have an open crowdfunder round right now, and we're just finishing up that current raise.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks so much for sharing. This is a really interesting space. I'm really familiar with some of these tools, so
cool.
I'm excited to kind of dive in here. So we always like to start off with things that we really liked about the presentation as a whole. Some things I like the branding throughout. It could be a little dark, but it could be my screen. But like, I do like that. It looks really good. It looks like you guys spent time on it. So well done there. I like that you started with your background. It really helps me understand where you're coming from, right? As an athlete, building a tool for other athletes or coaches makes a ton of sense. Your team's really impressive, especially that advisory part that you guys have is really, really good. And then obviously already having a completed over $1 million in raising funds is very impressive as well.
Awesome.
Are you guys is the 2.5 million on? I have a lot of questions too.
Sure.
So we'll get into those as we go into some of the feedback. But is this 2.5 million? Is that current revenue, or is that like what we're going towards with the raise?
So that's what we're going toward. That's where we think we're going to be in 18 months. I could get into the revenue projections and some of the assumptions that we're making there. But that's where we see ourselves in 18 months.
Okay. All right, let's get into like the feedback part of it, and then some of these. I have a lot of questions because, so let's get into there. Let me pull down the deck here real quick. Just get to you and me.
Should I stop sharing this, or?
Yeah, you can stop sharing me, or we can do it that way. Okay, so on the feedback side, one, we've got plenty of time, so I think you just slow down a little bit.
Sure.
That I think that would be really bit helpful because when you're going really, really fast, it does a couple things. One is, and this happens a lot, and I'm giving advice to those that are watching as well. If you're speaking quickly, it either shows that you're nervous, or two, you're trying to cover up something because you're going so quickly. And I don't know which one it is because we just met. Right? Sure. So typically people think the negative side, like you're trying to skim over something. And so that's kind of why I want to dive in a little bit deeper into here. Okay, so I didn't understand in the deck itself if you're selling to you kind of mixed between coaches and facilities. Can you explain what you mean by those two? They're very different types of people.
They're very different types of people, but they're generally the same person. So when we're going out and finding who the decision maker is, who's actually going to be the one signing the checks for us, they're the same people that are giving lessons more often than not. You have organizations that are run by the same guy that's getting paid $100 an hour to give little Johnny, 9-year-old lessons. So there are different terms, but they're the same person. There's also a very strange overlap in how many different hats these folks wear. So they'll wear the same hat for when they're doing a tryout for their team, when they're doing a showcase, when they're giving lessons, when they're doing rentals, when they're selling memberships for their open gym for, mom that wants to come and work out while their kid's getting a lesson. So they do a lot of different things, which is part of the reason that they need a custom solution, and that we have so much success building really weird business models for people. But it's also just, they're baseball coaches and they're not business people, and it's all one and the same.
Yeah, but walk me what is a facility to you? When you use that term, what does that mean?
Sure. A facility is just a training organization. So a facility will have
like a gym.
Yeah. So it's like it's like a gym, but it has different resources. So it might have a gym in it, but it also might have a batting cage, it might have a swimming pool. One of our facilities right now has 6 batting cages. They have a weight room. They have a cold plunge. They have a sauna. They have a basketball court. They have a volleyball court, and they have a football training area. So all those different resources have different capacities, and they have different categories of skills that they can actually host within. So it gets really complicated of, hey, I've got, 30 trainers and I've got 15 different features in my training location. Some of them have an open capacity, like a gym. You could have as many different people as you want there, but you can only get access to that if you're a member. If you want to get access to any of our trainers, then you have to either use your credits or your cash system. So it gets really complicated within those facilities. It's a lot of different resources, and we've kind of called it multiply constrained scheduling, just because you have to check so many different constraints before you can actually give the user the option to schedule.
Okay, yeah. So I think this is one area I think that you can improve on, because, like I said, a coach is just a coach, right? Like, and I say it this way: if I hired you to help me with baseball, I played baseball. I love baseball, right? Then you're like my coach, right? That's a one-on-one relationship. There's also a coach that is a team coach, and I'm going to pay the city and to have that relationship with that person, right? Then you have what you just described is I go to a facility and that's run by a coach, but it's actually the business owner or whatever. And then they might have multiple coaches, including themselves, as part of their staff, right? And then, yeah, so I think it being very intentional about which one of those people you're talking about is going to help align like the problem, like you just mentioned, right? A facility has these types of things, and it's difficult for them to do a thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I think that'll help really ground the problem statement, because I think that you glanced over the problem statement for a facility, and I'm thinking like a coach is like coaching a team of 12-year-olds, right? And then because of your background, you talked about you played college baseball or whatever. Then I'm like, oh wait, no, he's talking about a coach that's like a collegiate coach, because you talked about all the stats that they get, right? And nothing in the presentation talked about stats. Like I didn't understand where that fit into the whole conversation, yet that was the upsell. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I mean, there is a longer story behind that. And we've been a company for 3 years and built a lot of different things and sold to a lot of different folks. But yeah, it's an interesting crowd to deal with, because sometimes the coach is also the college coach is also the guy coaching the team. So yeah, I think that's just, I guess, vernacular that I'm a little bit too comfortable with just using in wholesale.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, when you say coach, and this happens in every industry, right? Like, it just doesn't matter. Like I could say coach, are we speaking the same language? And I think if you define that early on, then it helps us make sure we're on the same page, especially when it comes to the sales part of it, right? Because then you say a facility's average revenue is, $500,000 a year. But if you replace that with coach, I'm like, God dang, this coach is killing it. Like, how the heck is he doing $500,000 in sales with just, 12-year-olds running around? That's amazing. Like, that's a whole different group of human beings, right?
Yeah. I mean, we do have one coach that does $2 million because he's franchised basically his own training program. But yeah,
that's a whole nother set of category of buyer. Yeah. Right? And those are just called market segmentation, right? And you already know this, but for all those out there, just make sure I understand where in the market you're playing. And if you're selling to different types of groups, that's fine too. I just need to make sure I understand. Okay. Acronyms can be the death of people. ERP you used in the deck, and this is just for people that are out there. I think it's worth just spelling it out every time, especially if it's the first time it's being used. Then you can acronym it. But it just is a little thing, but I think it's really valuable if you don't know what an ERP is, for example. We already talked about the facilities and coaches thing. Okay, so the finance, like the business model, because you just showed a bar graph and it was just red, right? I don't know where the revenue is coming from. Now that I'm understanding more about who the buyer persona is, right? I think it's beautiful when people do like a stacked bar chart, right? So you have like these one-on-one coaches as one category of people. You have the facilities. And again, I'm just making generalities. But if you can tell me where that revenue is coming from, if they're all facilities, and that's really the hyper focus of what you're doing, and that's what you're communicating, then you can show me you've got the facilities subscription model. And then you also have that upsell. So you can show the two difference in how the upsell one grows over time, or whatever the math looks like, right? Sure. I think stacked bar charts do a really good job of showing that forecast of where your revenue is coming from. And I think simple fix, right? When it comes to the market, because again, going back to the beginning, I don't know who you're actually selling to. What we like to see, and Jess, my co-host, Jeff Erickson, who's from Forecaster, usually talks about like doing a bottom-up approach, right? So if we're talking about facilities, there are 100,000 of them in the US, all doing about $500,000 in sales. We take 1% of that. We can just run the math and we can say, this is the maximum money we could get plus the percentage of upsells, that's really the total addressable market, right? Versus the total amount of money spent on sports as a whole, right? Like
Yeah, I think I skipped over that. That's on one of the it's on one of the sidebars here. Yeah, so there's 30,000 sports training organizations and 2.2 million youth athletes. So I was on the left side of the full ones, and I was on the right side. So it just whichever way I guess I tend to sell that slide.
Cool. Yeah. So I think making sure you stick with the facilities and then using that as your base for the total market assessment, right? Like, again, what does 2 million people do? 2 million athletes. I don't know how that fits because you're not selling to each individual athlete, right?
Right. Well, if it's processing and each athlete has to process a certain amount of dollars, then yeah, they're
right. Just make sure that the numbers align so that I can stay with you.
Sure.
All right. Talk about the stacked bar graph. Yeah, I honestly think that, like, okay, so some other things in here. I'm extremely familiar with league apps. I didn't understand league apps is for social sports. It does a decent job for that. I don't know if it's good or bad, but it does a really good job for social sports, right? Lots of people use it.
What do you mean social sports?
Like volleyball. Like I play volleyball. I play softball. Many people who are in social sports use league apps, right? I would not use league apps for kind of this one-on-one coaching session. Like, you would not book me through league apps. That doesn't make sense. So the other ones, like MindBody, is hyper focused on yoga studios and that industry, and people can use it for coaching, but it's really meant for like organizations, like a yoga studio, right? Calendaring and scheduling and all that kind of stuff.
I said the same things every day of, why are you using this software to run your sports business? This doesn't make any sense. It's just that's who we're taking clients from. You can't,
That's crazy. That's crazy.
Make it up.
So I would say honestly, your biggest competition then, in my opinion, is like a straight up Calendly, right? But again, I don't know what you're talking about, like these facilities. Now it makes sense that a facility would use MindBody, right? Because that is directly, because I didn't have that connection. I'm like thinking coaching. I'm like, I don't understand. Just use Calendly, right? They can pay right on the spot. It does reminders for you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that was the disconnect for a lot of the rest of it. Does that make sense?
Sure.
So yeah, that's all the feedback I really have. So any questions from you?
No, that all makes sense.
Okay. So the final question we ask everything is, based off of what we heard today, would we move this company onto due diligence? And right now the answer is no, except I love this space, right? I love the coaching space. I almost built a tool that was very similar to like a league apps way back in the day.
Yeah.
So what I'd love to do is I'd like to see a demo of the product itself.
Sure.
Because I think we didn't get down to the actual functions and features and how they support these facilities. And so that's my feedback.
Sounds good.
Awesome. Well, Eli, thanks so much for presenting today. It was really great to hear what you're up to. And, if you guys are out there, please check out the Pitch Deck book. If you need help with your finances, check out Forecaster. They're a really great tool for, getting all those resources out there. And we'll see you all next time.